All right, we are rolling. We are in Addis Ababa on a layover. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Calvin Sun. I am holding Adam's phone right now, and we're in Addis Ababa. I am a born and raised lifelong New Yorker, and have been there ever since, but lost a few bets while bartending a few years after my father had suddenly died, and found myself in Egypt 36 hours later, and followed through on my word, which then led me to travel and discovering the beauties of it, and at the same time lost a few more bets that led me to apply to medical school and started a travel blog in my first year of med school, and ever since been traveling every month for the past 14 years, taking people along on all our trips to every single country in the world. And we've been doing this every month for the last 14 years while I graduated med school without skipping a beat, and became a doctor at the same time, thinking that I was going to get kicked out, but rather followed through and practiced at the same time as a physician in emergency medicine in New York City.
That was a pretty good intro. How are you both extreme in your travel and extreme as an entrepreneur? That's the vanity of the channel, right? We cover both travel and...
That's literally like the title of a chapter of one of my blog posts, where I found how travel was the only thing that was extreme enough to balance the extreme ends of the demands of medical school. Because I tried everything in the first few months of med school to balance out the burnout that most med students feel when they go to a medical school, which is, I tried going to the gym, yoga, meditation, all of it was helping, but ultimately the thing that was most efficient was taking these weekend trips where I would leave Friday night and come back Sunday before my Monday classes. And we'll do these quick trips to the Caribbean, someplace in Europe, and we would do this once a month. And that was the only thing that when I came back from an experience, my mind was fully recharged. I might be physically tired, but I was still young enough to be able to keep up with those physical demands. And mentally, I was reset enough to begin med school again in a way that 2 hours at the gym or 3 hours in yoga or 5 hours in meditation could achieve, which to me is not as efficient because I had to do multiple times of that to reach the same level as a weekend trip. And I would travel and study at the same time. And we've known now that the extremes of being in different circumstances allows your brain to retain information better. So I inadvertently became a better student the more I studied in different environments. And they've proven this, where if you studied 10 hours in the same cafe without getting up once, your brain will have a hard time on the recall test that they do an hour or a few hours later, compared to the study group where they took people around different cafes and different environments, studying the same material with far less time because of the commute time. But they were more efficient because their brain was able to retain the information better by being in different environments. And when they took the same recall test compared to the control study group that stayed in the same cafe for 10 hours, the latter study group that were in different environments did better on those exams. But I didn't know this at the time because this study was proven years after graduate med school. But I graduated medical school and I became a resident, and I continued to do that. And I traveled 70 countries during med school and 80 countries during residency, finishing both on time, 4 years each. And after 8 years of that, 150 countries, 70 plus 80, I continued to do as an attending, this time with even more control of my schedule. And this lifestyle of extremes led me to publish a book with HarperCollins that's in bookshelves everywhere and where books are sold, and they decided to name it after my travel blog called the Monsoon Diaries.
All right, there's a lot good there. I think what might separate you from some entrepreneurs, you've mentioned a few times, I don't need to make money from letting people tag along with me when I travel. Do you want to elaborate on that? Does that make you better, worse? Some people say that the existential threat of, oh my God, I can't pay my bills, support my family, or myself even, if my business fails, that's what drives me and makes me better. Why is it actually a good thing to not quit your day job?
If you build it, they will come. What we like to tell aspiring entrepreneurs, the less you do it for the money, the irony and the magic is that people will pay you for the authenticity. It's the best way I can compare it to is like that scene from Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade where he sees the chasm, and then he's told that there's a bridge, and he's like, I don't know, it looks like I'm going to fall in. And by just closing eyes against all odds, against all sense of logic, the fact it was invisible allowed him, with that faith, to step on that invisible bridge. Now, I don't recommend stepping on invisible bridges in real life, but it's the intuition that he felt at the time. Because you were not all chasing holy grails, so I don't recommend stepping across a chasm. But what is your invisible bridge, or that bridge of incidents that speaks to you what you would do without doing it for the money? Now, Adam did mention that this travel blog that I started in medical school and this travel lifestyle led to people to ask who were reading if they could come along on my trips. And it was a very Forrest Gumpian response that I did, where I turned around, I was like, what are you doing here? They would just show up at airports and ask, hey, I've been reading a blog, can I come on their trips? Because I would announce my trips ahead of time, but not as like an invitation, but just letting people know where I'll be. So my mom who's reading it will know that I'm safe. And I didn't say no. I just begrudgingly said, sure, come along. I'm not going to hold your hand, and you got to take care of yourself. And it was from that attitude of not doing it for the money led people to be more curious about it, and therefore bring their friends, because they knew they were signing up for an authentic experience rather than a travel company looking to make money. Because I was not looking to make money and I was just happy to have people along, well, I started, after a couple of years, started becoming more appreciative, enjoying how someone could be there to hold a camera or to hold something as you run to the bathroom while waiting in line for bus tickets, so you save a lot of time. And happiness is best shared. I'm glad I learned that by practicing it rather than being told that. So I started enjoying having people coming along after a few years of it. People started paying more and more to have that authentic experience, because they knew this whole time I was starting to become a doctor. I hadn't been kicked out yet, and I knew I was going to make my full-time job money as a doctor once I graduated medical school and residency. But then that inadvertently, because there were so many of them paying to come on my trips for that authentic experience, knowing that I was not making any money off of it, I ended up making money off of it because the volume I couldn't control for. Is I generally budgeted my trips so that I would at least break even with the group I was bringing. But because 10 people that I would budget for, it's like, oh, I only expect 10 people to come on this trip, because that's most, like, who else would come on a 1-week trip to Iran in 2011 at the time? 16 people signed up for that trip. Now, I'm not going to change my price because 16 people signed up, because a lot of it was last minute, but that 5 extra people ended up generating that profit margin revenue that allowed me to invest for the next trip and the next trip. And because I was doing it every month for the past 14 years, that consistency of authenticity, that consisting of always following through on the promises you made to other travelers and picking the trips to places I've never been to before, just generated more of an interest that led to a community of thousands of people around the world that come on our trips right now.
There's so many tangents that we got to fit in before my boarding time.
I'm going to give you more than less.
No, this is awesome.
We had just met a few hours ago, by the way.
We got to talk. Do you want to talk?
Bangui, Central Africa.
Wait, we got to talk about the synchronicity.
Yeah.
The fact that we knew we're going to end up talking. We also need to clarify that when you started mentioning Indiana Jones and a chasm scene, I thought you were going to say where he's reaching down into the chasm and he thinks he can grab the chalice, and his father, Sean Connery, God rest his soul, says, "Let it go, Indy, let it go," and that's saves him.
Yeah.
So similarly, you talked about the leap of faith over a chasm.
Yeah. He let go. He's just like, whatever.
In the other scene, it's letting go. So the leap of faith.
That's actually the last few lines of my book.
Is let go or leap of faith?
Once you let go, you are let go. Because we live our entire lives. When we start off in our entire lives begin with hopefully guardians that care, or a society that ostensibly tries to keep you safe, by telling how dangerous the outside world is. So we can't help but hold on for our safety. And that's intention-wise, what we need as children. But when we become adults, we have to learn and take the effort to be curious of what we can then let go. Which parts that you let go determine the kind of person and adult that you will become. Because we can't hold on to everything. As a kid, you can't afford to take risks because it's a dangerous world out there. But as you're an adult and you're more able to take care of yourself, you're going to start to shave away at the things you don't need to have in your life as much anymore, because you're now determining your own self. What can you unlearn? What can you let go? And the very things that have been constricting you and confining you out of the abundance of safety and caution will also let go of you, so that you're then allowed to take that leap of faith for your own adventures to then call your own.
All right, so many directions. Let's go with this one.
Yeah.
Synchronicity. There was some crazy stuff that happened today.
Yeah.
The fact that we ended up, so we saw each other briefly. I was absolutely honored that you thought, when we introduced ourselves yesterday, landing in Bangui, you said, "I think I've heard your name before." I was like, "Oh my God, somebody's actually heard of me." But I thought that was it. I'll never see that dude again. Too bad. And then, can you explain? I had to go there because I'm switching a ticket because I couldn't get a visa in time for Sudan. I'm buying my ticket in this weird behind the scenes office of Ethiopian Airlines in this little airport. Why were you there? Because that seems so improbable. And then you were mentioning the improbability of the other factors going on.
So I've developed a lifestyle where I can't help but trust my intuition. I can't afford the time and effort to be anxious all the time and double checking, triple checking everything because of the lifestyle I lead and also my day job as an ER doctor. Like I have to trust my first intuition because it's a matter of life and death. I went through 4 years of training for it. So intuition is important. So when I first saw Adam, we arrived yesterday and I saw his name on William's placard as he was greeting them at the arrivals lounge. I already had an intuition that I was gonna talk to Adam one day. I didn't want to force it. And there was nothing in the circumstances of the arrivals lounge yesterday that made me feel like it was the right time.
Lounge is a generous term.
A room or whatever it was, shack, lodge. This is also how I choose my next trips. I choose everyone asks like, oh, how do you choose your trips? How do you know which trip to go to next month? It's intuition. A trip that I'm on, people will say something, do something that makes me feel like, oh, that's the one. And then I follow through on that intuition. I'm usually right because when I do a trip 3 weeks before the trip happens, on the last minute one, the right people, 7, 10 people, 12 people sign up, even though we had a 2 to 3 week turnaround, and they all meet one another. They're like, oh my God, we were destined to meet. What kind of environment self-selects 12, 13 strangers, 12 to 20, 30, 40, I've taken as many 60 strangers around the world for a trip that was planned the last minute, unless you have something of an unknown thing, the intuition that binds us all. And that was the same feeling I felt when I saw him. And then as we were leaving, both of us had 2 days in Bangui, Central Africa Republic. How did I know that Adam only had a 2-day itinerary? Most people who come to Bangui stay here for weeks to months. And I did not have enough, everyone knows Americans don't get a lot of vacation time. I can only afford 2 days. It's better to go to a buffet and try a little bit of everything rather than eat just one thing in the buffet. So we both did 2 days. That was already synchronous enough. But there was a system error when I was checking in. I already had my ticket. I already had checked in online beforehand. They already had my ticket in hand, but there was something in the system at the check-in desk where the woman had to take me past immigrations without stamping in or out, which rarely ever happens, to a back room where Adam was already there trying to get out of his kerfuffle that was unrelated to mine. And literally I gave my password to the guy on the computer that was helping Adam, and he presses one button. He's like, okay, you can go back and get your ticket. I decided to stay because I knew it was so arbitrary. I was like, why? Did you need to check my visa? Was there something wrong with my passport? He's like, no. Just a random system error. I just need to press the button and you were cleared. I was like, that's simple? Then I looked at Adam doing his thing. I was like, all right, this is the time to talk and get to know each other. And then we ended up spending 20, 30 minutes in that room.
And then some hours of flight time and post-flight time. But the other insane coincidence was you heard me chitter-chattering in Polish. And the people there that were also in a kerfuffle and had to spend some money, overweight baggage or something, also arbitrary coincidence that they got caught with some extra weight. I showed them the title of my book to say, oh, this is what I do. The man pulls up his sleeve and he has a tattoo. Something about extreme experiences is the essence of my life or something. That was the tattoo on his arm across from the other arm with
and you're witnessing a synchronicity as it's happening because as you're saying that, it's the title of my comprehensive blog post, the one that I wrote at the end of residency, my last day of residency, where I literally wrote, the extremes of medical school must be balanced by the extremes of my travel. That was the only way I could have survived the extremes of what comes with medical training in the United States.
So there it goes. So there's the blog post, there's his tattoo, and then the book that I'm holding as he rolls his tattoo.
I mean, you can choose to say, oh, extreme is just a popular word. But you know what? If you want to choose to see the world that way, there's no magic in that. And that is why you may not feel the world may be as magical as the way we see it. It's a choice.
Well, let me address head on, because one of the people in the group of that Polish group asked, do you might have a touch of ADHD? And I said, listen, if it doesn't irritate too many people too much of the time, and it helps do a lot of awesome things, and you're not hurting anyone, and maybe you're adding some value to the world, fine. You know what? I'm tired of analyzing it.
And to me, as a clinician, ADHD is another word and label that we use to ascribe a personality trait of somebody, and it's like a tool. It depends. It's not about what it's used It's not about what it is, it's how it's used. A hammer can be a weapon that kills people, or a hammer could be used to build houses for the struggling, or Habitat for Humanity. That hammer is the same thing as ADHD. Yes, relative to the norm, when you're not using it appropriately, it is a pathology. And yes, we have medicine for that. ADHD can hurt. But if you harness it for something good and useful, like a hammer used to build houses for those in need, then ADHD used for something like emergency medicine. As an ER doctor, former bartender, the ADHD is a necessity to help people that come to the hospital for their emergency needs, where you cannot predict the pace of which the patients come in, whether it's during a pandemic or afterwards. So ADHD is helpful, or planning a trip and being comfortable with the uncomfortable. So it's not about what you call it, it's how you use it.
Yeah, so anyways, none of that was psychiatric advice, by the way. It's just talking about what came to mind, and that was the structure that we agreed on, right? We're going to maybe, who knows? But hopefully it's channeled well. I want to share some of the other secrets and some of the stuff that's new with you. I asked, how the hell did you get noticed by literary agents, 2 of them, that then pitched you and you got the HarperCollins contract? And you said it was by virtue of not being tied to a single hospital, the fact that you were a gig economy worker, is that the term you'd use? You were not tied by the restrictive media policy of any hospital during COVID, and you were allowed to say, we're dying in the hospitals because of a lack of personal protective equipment. The doctors and the hospitals loved you because you were allowed to say things that a doctor tied to the restrictions.
Media clauses.
Of the media clauses. So there's an irony of where letting go and pursuing your intuition and doubling down on your instinct to travel, which necessitated having this almost freelance approach to your medical career.
Did not expect it to happen.
That allowed you the freedom to then do something existentially that was needed during the pandemic, which is to say we are dying as medical professionals, and that, being on TV, got you noticed by agents. Is that correct?
Yeah, not anything that was planned. It was very organic.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about letting go. It's kind of like meditation, or untethering your soul to all these contraptions that we made for ourselves that define what we think is happiness, but really we find out that true happiness is letting go of all these contraptions that actually control us. Meditation is all about letting go to the point where you can then make clear decisions once you let go of everything. So it's free from distractions or any influences. And those are the best decisions are made without you realizing what those decisions are until you engage in that letting go. So once I graduated residency after traveling 150 countries at the time, I had thought this whole time I was going to get kicked out of medical school, and I was doing this travel blog as a backup option once I flunked out of med school or residency. Those possibilities almost happened. I ended up graduating residency, and I needed a job, but unlike all my other friends who had already gotten full-time jobs, I had none. And I wanted to focus full-time on passing the board so I can prove to everyone that doubted me in medical school and residency that I can be a board-certified physician who still traveled the world at the same time without skipping a day of class or a shift. And I focused so much on the boards, I realized I need to make money. I'm not paid by a residency salary anymore. I'm literally have to pay off my $300,000 in medical school debt that I couldn't pay off because I was traveling, so I need to be a little more responsible. So instead of signing a full-time contract, I had no idea at the time. I just wanted to do per diem, where I get to control which days I wanted to work. So 1099, purely mercenary, gun for hire, where I get to pick whatever shift I wanted to work at this hospital. And there's a couple hospitals that needed help because a lot of underserved hospitals in many communities in New York are understaffed, and therefore they are willing to pay for you to fill holes. So as a result, I started working at that one hospital, did a few shifts here and there, picking and choosing whatever, and people liked me and they referred me to other hospitals. And within a year, I had about 20 hospitals that I was contracted with to work only as 1099. And because of that, I did not sign a full-time contract ever because I didn't need to. I was already working as much as my full-time colleagues without the benefits or, the equity or whatever they were getting. I was just purely working $1 per hour and had to get my own benefits. But I like the freedom and the autonomy because I then could choose when to travel. And that lifestyle allowed me the flexibility that I could never have imagined when I was in residency and medical school, because this time I can actually choose how many days to work. I could work 20 days a month so that I work no days the next month to travel. And that pretty much is like 10 days a month, which is the industry standard for someone in a full-time job. And then the pandemic rolled around. And when it did, and I started seeing in the news, I started saying to myself, well, if I wanted to survive this pandemic, if it's really killing everyone, I'm going to sit this one out for the next 2 years. And when I let go, the irony was I found myself actually going every day to work, picking up shifts at half a dozen hospitals around New York within the first 30 days. I think I worked 25 shifts out of the first 30, only took 5 days off. I actually ended up ironically working more than my full-time colleagues, but it was at different hospitals, and because I had the autonomy to choose my shifts, I went in with more confidence and not feeling I was being dragged into work. It does make a huge difference of the mental health component of why you're working, that I was choosing to go in. And because I was at many different hospitals, that gave me a perspective that a lot of my full-time employees stuck to one hospital could not provide. So by the time it came to interviews, they were getting fired for speaking the truth of not having a PPE, because once you Google that doctor, they're usually full-time and tied to that one hospital. So that one hospital will get in trouble for that one interview that one doctor gave. And that one doctor, since they violated media clause and made the hospital look bad, they would get fired the next day, leaving more openings. When you Googled my name, would find a list of 20 hospitals that I was attached to. Couldn't put that on any news byline. So just wrote doctor in New York City. And when they asked me which hospital I worked, I literally had to say, I worked at 3 different hospitals this morning alone. Working 2 hours in this hospital, 3 hours in the other one, and got a cab to another hospital because they did not have enough doctors. I don't even remember what I ate for breakfast. Why does it matter what I say which hospital I work? It's everywhere, and it's the truth that all of this lack of PPE and people were dying and people were coming with tests that the hospital didn't have were happening in every hospital in New York because I've seen it. So it doesn't matter which hospital you need to identify because it's all of it. And because I didn't have to identify a hospital, and when you Googled me and tried to identify me, it just saw all the hospitals. Hospital administrators didn't fire me. They promoted me and actually gave me more privileges to pick more shifts because I was speaking truth to power. I couldn't get any hospital in trouble, and they were starting to get donations from the public for PPE they should have been paying for that because of my interviews. It was a win-win situation. Honestly, I wish we didn't have to come to that, and I wish we lived in a world where I didn't have to be rewarded for something like that, and I would get more shifts, and they liked me for that. I mean, that was the administrator's prerogative, but that escalation of visibility in all the news media, because I just kept giving 20 news interviews a day for the first 40 days of the pandemic, led me to have literary agents by the time it was winding down to email me asking to represent, to publish my story into a book.
All right. Now, this could be an exclusive. You said I could ask you about recent events, including self-diagnosing cancer.
Oh, yeah.
You don't look like a dude with health issues. You look fit. Oh, wait, you want to show off? Holy shit. Okay, I thought you were going to show off.
I found my own cancer.
All right, so...
Yeah, that's my kidney. Got taken out there.
So this could actually...
5 months ago.
And I thought you were about to show off a six-pack or something. Could you explain...
Good excuse now.
Public health service announcement, or public service announcement. You're how old?
I just turned 38.
38. How do you does this mean that all of us should be screening for all kinds of cancer earlier?
It depends on what kind of patient you are.
And how did you find this?
So I have my own personal ultrasound. So when you work per diem, you sometimes have to have your own equipment. Just because it's expedient, you don't have to follow the hospital rule, like a media clause when you're 1099. And if for some of you are interested, when you're 1099, you have a special kind of contract where they don't have to have a reason to not hire you for more shifts ever again. They don't have to go through the whole legal process. They just don't have to. They don't pay for your benefits, and they don't like you. They don't have to. It's less drama for them. They don't have to schedule you. And if you don't like them, you don't have to schedule them. But they're assuming that you need the money, so that's why you have that. But because of that independence, I need to have my own equipment just to be safe. So I have my own personal ultrasound to put in IVs and to just do a quick diagnosis in case the ultrasounds are filled up, or I don't have time to wait for an ultrasound sonographer to certify the results. But ultimately, it guides your diagnosis, prognosis for many of your patients when you have your ultrasound. And I have my ultrasound. I put it onto myself one day while waiting for a patient to get ready, and lo and behold, I found a tumor on my right kidney. And
so not everybody could screen for a kidney tumor.
What was the thing that compelled me to put that ultrasound to my kidney was something that, and remember, I always trust my intuition. So to your question, not everyone has an ultrasound, but what everyone does have access to now is the ability to obtain a full body MRI. That, such as companies like Pronuvo, has made it available to the masses. Any one of you watching this right now can get a full body MRI without the need for a referral. You will have to pay out of pocket, but because it's becoming more widely available to consumers, prices are dropped significantly, and to continue to dropping it as more demand is made and there are more competitors.
And they will pick up all kinds of cancer?
So MRIs are the best at picking most types of solid organ cancers in your entire body, with the exception of a CT scan for the chest and a colonoscopy for the gut and an ear, neck, and throat laryngoscopy for the sinuses.
And PSA count for the prostate?
Well, the PSA count depends on your risk factors, because if you do your PSA count too early, you might get a lot of false positives. So
But that's why you need the early testing to get the baseline, right?
You need to get it depending on your family history, which is why the answer to should you get a full body MRI tomorrow, which you can, anyone watching this can, it depends on the kind of patient you are. If you are a decisive patient, that it can take charge of your health and have all the decision-making process already practiced, like I have as an ER doctor, trusting my heuristics and intuition, then by all means the full body MRI may be helpful to you. Because once I saw the solid tumor on my right kidney on the MRI, confirming it as a mass of unknown etiology, so it could have been a cyst, a benign tumor, I was decisive enough to know that the next step would be to find a surgeon. And when I found the surgeon, within the week, I had to pick the 3 available surgeons that could see me so quickly. They said, you know what, you're 37, this is 5 months ago, you're 37, you're healthy, you have no symptoms, your urine tests are normal, your blood tests are normal, you have no family history of cancer, you have no cancer, this is a cyst. If you want to take it out, we should take it out, because it's a cancer to prove it otherwise, but we can wait. How about we schedule the surgery 2 months or 3 months from now? I was decisive. I was like, I want it out tomorrow. So we scheduled the surgery literally within days. I walked in without having time to really contemplate what was happening. Got knocked out for my first ever surgery. When I woke up, they told me, hey, I knew the plan was just to take out the tumor and part of the kidney, but we ended up taking out the entire kidney. And that was a big shock to me, because the original plan was just to take out part of it. This was 5 months ago. I woke up to find out that I lost the entire kidney when the original plan was just to take out part of it. Then I spent the next week wondering if I made the right move.
Right.
Maybe I was too decisive. Maybe I was going to get a phone call saying, hey, the pathology report came back on your kidney and it was totally normal. That mass was a benign cyst tumor that you could have kept and your kidney would have been fine. So actually, ironically, was hoping for cancer.
To validate
my decision making. So can you live with that if you're going to get a full body MRI? If you're an indecisive person and you see that cyst and you see the report, the MRI, that says, we don't know what this is, but it's a mass of unknown etiology.
Did it turn out to be the right call?
So I got a phone call 1 week later. My surgeon calls me up and he's like, I don't know what possessed you to get that MRI, but you just saved your own life. That was stage 1A renal cell carcinoma of a malignant type that would have spread, that we've known of this type, spreads extremely quickly. They will kill a patient within months if left undetected and uncaught. So I'm very glad that we acted as soon as we did, and we removed your kidney. Removing your entire kidney is like burning a forest around a mini fire to contain it. It's not ideal. I don't want to lose a kidney, but sometimes in the context of cancer, it might be necessary to better control for that.
And can you account for why you were so decisive about something that could have been benign?
Because I trusted my intuition. I just knew that it should not have belonged there, that it did not feel like even though I didn't feel anything, the only thing I had was left-sided back pain for 5 years. Eventually the back pain would have probably got me the MRI, but it would have been too late, I think.
Lower back pain can be an early.
Yeah, I would have gotten the MRI for lower back, because I had gotten a lot of x-rays in my back, and it just said, it was normal, and I would get massages and PT, and I would still have the left-sided back pain. Now, the back pain does not explain the tumor, because the tumor was in the right front part of my kidney. It does not explain for left lower back pain, anatomically, scientifically, but it could have been a signal in my brain that says, hey, you should get an MRI. It doesn't matter what you do, it's how you get there, and the fact that the ultimate result was I got rid of my own cancer. My surgeon said, you beat cancer before you even knew it. And you can look back knowing that you don't have to worry about this ever again. Now, the funny part here is about the synchronicity. And that same phone call is like, your name sounds really familiar. I know I picked you really quickly, but now that I had time to digest, your last name sounds so familiar. It's like, did you have a dad that worked at Mount Sinai Hospital? I was like, yeah, of course. I'm a doctor at Mount Sinai Hospital, and my dad worked at Mount Sinai Hospital. And I was like, yes, but your dad wasn't a MD doctor or surgeon like you. Your dad was a research scientist. He's like, how did you know that? And I said, holy crap. Your father was my first boss when I worked my first job and I was 16 years old at a lab in Mount Sinai. Is your dad Peter Polisi? He's like, yes. He's like, your dad is my first boss. A few weeks later, I'm giving the story at a fundraiser for a bunch of real estate investors about like believing in intuition, blah blah blah. And obviously they were actually captivated. They didn't leave. I thought it was too woo for them. One person came up to me after the speech. It's like, it was so compelling. I usually leave before the speech, but the way you spoke about this made me want to stay. And I don't know why I want to stay. Something compels me to ask you, who was your surgeon? And I was like, why? Do you have kidney cancer too? He's like, no, like, I'm totally fine. I just need to know who your surgeon was. And I was like, oh, Michael Polisi. He's like, that's my brother. And he's he's not even a doctor. He sells insurance. And then a few days after that, my brother calls me up and he was like, hey, did you know your surgeon was your boss's son, your first boss's son? And yeah, he was the chair of the department and everything in Mount Sinai. His son would go to med school at the time. Like my brother's 14 years older, so I was like, I knew him. I was telling my brother Linus, I was like, hey Linus, it's already too late. I already made the connection. I was like, no, but you don't know this part. Your late father, my dad died when I was 19. Your late father did a study that funded his father's lab, so you can say that your late dad, who's no longer with you, saved your life, because he funded my surgeon's father's lab to put his son to medical school, to then have his son grow up to be a surgeon to operate on me. And then the way it was delivered to me was father, brother, father. Comes full circle. This is all in the span of 3 to 4 weeks.
And told in the span of 3 to 4 minutes.
And
speaking of time, I have a question for you to take it from the amazing, whatever you want to call it, level of, as you say, woo-woo stuff, to the very, very pedestrian question of, when your boarding time was officially started 4 minutes ago, but flight time isn't until a bit after 10, which is more than 35 minutes from now, would you already be at the gate religiously?
I would, but at the same time, you're literally at a lounge where you're right next to the gates, and you travel enough that they don't close the gate until 20 minutes before departure.
Yeah.
So you have that buffer. You know that you have status, Adam. So
do I?
Yeah, you're gold.
So does that mean they're less likely to leave me behind?
Yeah, you can board in zone 1. You can skip the line and just board whenever you want.
Oh, I wish I found out. I kept thinking...
is this woo-woo? Because we literally had a movie celebrate its 10th year anniversary because it was so successful. It's called Interstellar. It uses physics and Kip Thorne to explain the possibility of intuition synchronicity as something where it could be your future self communicating with you to talk to me right now. You can prove this through mathematics and physics, and Interstellar is a representation of that. Is it really woo-woo if we just don't have the science to disprove it or prove it yet? So we can't help but believe, or choose to believe, that in the context of physics and Interstellar, that magic does exist. We just don't have the science to prove it yet.
I'll tell you one thing. There was something about the way you communicated on the plane. You asked me about the probability of two Polish people being in Bangui, Central African Republic at the same time. Not that big a coincidence, happens all the time. And then he said, what are the chances that one would have extreme in a phrase tattooed on his arm?
To even think about that. To even want to show you that. Like, look.
And then whoa, that's in the title of my book.
He could have been like, oh, extremes are a very popular word. It would have slipped his mind. It could have been the word "the" to him.
But we decided to share how extreme shows up in things that matter to us. His tattoo, my book title. And then the chances that you would get the feeling, I think I'm going to talk to that dude. And I also thought, that dude, I think it would be cool to talk to him, but again, we didn't have a pretext yesterday. And then the way that you described, and then all these characters coming together that have these things in common did feel a bit like very low probability. And
it's also Bangui. This is not Paris, France. This is Bangui, Central African Republic.
Yes.
We were there for 2 days, not 10 weeks.
Yes. And we both had no business being in that lounge.
I didn't have to have that system error.
You had a weird unexplained system error, and I had a visa denied that I was assured would be no problem to get.
And you almost didn't even make that flight. You were supposed to board a different flight. And you are staying an extra day. So in geometry, there's actually a statistical anomaly when they talk about this. When you close your eyes, what is the statistical probability of drawing two lines and having them intersect? 100%. So two things happening that you two Polish people are making. That's two lines.
All the time.
But to draw a third line or more to cross in the same point, because 2 points is 100%. To draw a third line with your eyes closed, that's essentially, we didn't plan for this. With your eyes closed and draw a third line to have it intersect at the same point becomes literally like impossible. 4 or 5, you already have 6 points on you. 6 lines on you. To all intersect at 1 point is statistically impossible unless there's something else to explain and we just don't have the means to.
It does make you wonder. It does make you wonder. It happens. You nudged me to recall that the best stories, this relates to synchronicity and intuition and going with the flow and letting go, and the leap of faith.
Once you let go, the seed blooms. We can't explain how seeds germinate and bloom, how life finds a way and vines grow in urban jungles that have been left decrepit. It's all concrete. Like there's no soil, and somehow plants find a way to grow. You know, we have a fungus now that eats, I don't know, carbon dioxide, a bacteria that eats plastic.
Right.
So it's only by letting go and letting it do those things. How's penicillin founded? It was a mistake. He let go and it started, you know.
And along those lines, it's how I find the best stories is often not having much of a plan, relying on meeting somebody like Nikki who's working for a startup conservation group that's going to be figuring out how to take over and run the national parks of South Sudan, which is mission impossible times 10. And that was completely unplanned. It's one of the best stories I've come across lately. Your backstory is fantastic. Also unplanned, my discovery of it. I know that you're already semi-famous. What do you call the show? Famous, internet famous, Instagram famous?
Just doing my job.
Certainly among travel circles, apparently.
I'm comfortable in front of the camera.
And you do well, sir. We could ask about future plans, but I'm worried about missing my flight. Do you want to quickly mention future plans?
The reason why I brought the whole interstellar thing is the intuition is that you will, in the next couple of minutes, feel that oomph to make you like, okay, we got to go to the gate. There's nothing to disprove the possibility that it's the future Adam just saying, okay, now it's time to go.
Don't miss this.
You got what you need out of this. Future is that Adam's gonna go on to Cairo, and to go to Chad, where I was 4 days ago.
Inshallah, I don't know if it'll work.
It's gonna happen, and then
maybe not this time.
I have 4 other travels with me in the airport having dinner. I'm gonna rejoin them later, and they signed up. There are 4 strangers that met me on this trip. For this trip, and we're going to go on to Republic of Congo tomorrow, to then cross the river to Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo, then come back and then fly back for Burundi, and I will have taken a stranger or more to have every country in the world.
What? Wait, I thought you were missing Sudan.
Oh, and then so far, and I'm missing Sudan and 2 or 3 Caribbean countries.
Likewise. And I want to add this. Mohammed, you're out there. I won't mention your last name, but there is somebody that I met because I showed up at a conference last minute, Dubai, GTEx. I stayed in touch with him. I kept asking, man, can you think of a solution? I know you're Sudanese, not born there, but you're connected by family. You know the amazing thing about even a trip that fails, where you don't get the visa, is I discovered that this guy that I met by accident, he's like you, he's happy when the camera pointed at him. But that's it. That's all I knew about him. I didn't know that he might be working on a project related to the process of immigration. He knows people related to the immigration system in Sudan. And why am I sharing this? Again, it's this synchronicity, letting go, coincidence, putting yourself in a situation where something can happen, and then being open to letting it happen. And then actually there's a weird balance, a dichotomy or duality of pursuit and being relentless and goal-focused, and at the same time being open that maybe that was not your goal. Maybe the goal of trying to get the visa this time open up the possibility of discovering that somebody you know is working on the new visa system, and you will be able possibly to document that, write about it, talk about it, and share that journey with them later in the future. Just wanted to share that sometimes a failure can result in but I discovered that somebody I already know will be an awesome person to interview in that country in a few months.
There's no such thing as mistakes, just lessons, and there's no such thing as dead ends, as detours. And the worst thing that can happen is either a good trip or a good story. So the way I see it
that could be the wrap up there.
I wanted to end on that. But every trip that has been postponed or had a detour was meant to happen, because I've always followed through and all the trips that have been detoured and failed, I've eventually been able to visit there. But the people that had come on the revisit, on the reattempts, and finally going there were the perfect groups. And I knew that actually, if it worked out the first time around, like I know my trip to Syria was postponed 3 times. The group that eventually did come, and the third time that worked, are still best friends. They all hang out together. They want to make each other weddings. I knew if we went the first time, it was still a great group, but I don't think it would have been as tight knit as the group that eventually followed it. So I have to trust the process, live the process.
So the canceled launches, if you want to make an analogy to astronauts that train for months or years, and then the launch gets canceled, who knows? Maybe the subsequent launch that actually succeeds is the one that actually.
Yeah, they were being protected. If you force it too much, it's like trying to make a seed grow by holding it tight, the fist tight. And once you let go, it's going to grow. Or like clipping a bird's wings. If you try to control a bird and you don't let it fly, it's never going to learn how to fly.
Perfect.
So
I think on that note, man, it's been an honor.
time to go.
It's been
That's,
fun.
that's your intuition saying that's time to go.
Yeah, no, this has been absolutely fantastic. Whether or not we travel together in the near future, it'll be an honor. What's the name of your book, by the way?
The Monsoon Diaries.
Okay.
Named after my blog, The Monsoon Diaries.
And you do explain the origin story of Monsoon Diaries in your book.
Yes.
Okay. We're not going to cover personal stuff, but congratulations
Thank you.
on recent news.
Yeah.
Similarly, in personal life, it is sometimes good to both go with the flow, pursue, go with the flow,
And the people who truly love you will support you in whatever you do.
and pursue, what is it, serotonin love, not, and
Pursue the serotonin love and let go of dopamine love. Where is it? You're going to meet many people who will take your breath away, but the one that reminds you to breathe is the one to keep.
on that note, dear watchers, listeners, if you're out there still with us, remember to breathe and value your breathing, enjoy your breathing. Until next time, over and out.
See you on the next trip.
See you on the next trip.